Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Economy podcast. I'm your host, Shayna Davis. I'm so glad that you're here today. And before we get started, I would love if you do me a favor. So, wherever it is that you are listening to this episode, I want you to take a screenshot. With that screenshot, I want you to post it on LinkedIn, tag me, and then I just want to hear your biggest aha moment or your biggest takeaways from this episode. And the reason why I do that is because to me, like far too many leaders, they don't know how to cultivate and build the external influence that the new world demands. And every time we share these episodes, we're going to expose them to the signals that they need to develop in order to lead better. So I appreciate you in advance of being willing to share. So we're going to get to what I think is going to be a very enlightening episode. You know, I've been thinking a lot about companies recently, companies I've worked with, companies I'm observing, and you can tell a lot about a company by what it does when things get shaky. Like, not when everything's booming, not when the stock price is up, not when the press is glowing, but when the market tightens, when headlines get nervous, when layoffs start trending, when investors start asking harder questions. That's when leadership signals matter most. And here's what most executive teams are still getting wrong. Yes, even in 2026, they treat leadership visibility like a communication preference. They treat it like it's optional and nice to have, something you turn on when you have an announcement. But in unstable markets, visible leadership, it's not branding, it's protection. And we have to begin to see it in a different way. And if you're leading at an enterprise level right now, this conversation is not theoretical, it's structural because the market doesn't tolerate silence anymore. It actually interprets it. So I want to tell you a story. I'm going to introduce you to a fictional company. I'm not going to say their real name, but if you're in tech, finance, healthcare, or frankly, any modern industry, I'm sure you are going to recognize the pattern immediately, just like I did. So I'm going to call this company, to protect the names of the innocent, I'm going to call them North Star Systems. They were a mid-sized SaaS company. They'd had strong growth for 5 years. They were founder led. They had a great product, great engineers, like great product, strong team, all the things that we think is going to help us win in this decade and more, but it's not. But that's not what this episode is about. In the boom years, this company, they didn't need much external leadership presence. They didn't need much external visibility from anyone other than maybe the founder because the revenue spoke for itself. Like the founder, like they did the occasional keynote, his LinkedIn was sporadic. The investors, they were happy for the most part. And then the market shifted. And then funding tightened. And then two large customers delayed renewals. A competitor, they raised a massive round and they dominated the headlines. And what did North Star do? They went quiet. No perspective at all from leadership. No visible reassurance to customers. No strategic commentary about where the industry was heading. No executive presence in media conversations. Internally now, they were working hard, but externally, it was nothing but crickets. And here's what happened next. Customers started asking, are they okay? Recruiters began circling their top engineers, like trying to poach them. Investors started pressing for reassurance. A rumor actually circulated that they were preparing for a down round, and none of it was confirmed. None of it was even denied. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Silence is never empty. Silence is interpreted. And this is where I want to shift your thinking about reputation risk. That's what we're talking about today. Reputation risk, it doesn't begin with scandal. It doesn't begin when things are shaky. It begins with absence. When the markets feel unstable, people look for leadership signals. They don't just look at your earnings reports, they look at you, your tone, your presence, your clarity, your conviction. And if they can't find those signals, guess what's going to happen? They're going to create their own narrative. And narrative vacuum, narratives that are created in a vacuum, is one of the fastest ways to erode trust. And all of this is completely avoidable if you would have more presence and visibility so that you're creating the narrative instead of trying to get in front of the narrative after it has already been created on your behalf. In unstable markets, visible leadership reduces 5 categories of risk: reputational risk, talent risk, commercial risk, investor risk, and operational fragility. So let's walk through them. Number one is reputational risk. When uncertainty rises, people scan for steady voices. And if your executives are invisible externally, your company feels reactive instead of steady, because visible leaders actually anchor perception. They provide context and they calm speculation. Number two is talent risk. High performers are allergic to instability. Like they don't just evaluate compensation, they evaluate confidence and they have options. So when leaders show up externally, thoughtfully and consistently, it signals durability. But when leaders disappear, top talent quietly updates the resume. And it's going to affect top talent wanting to come and work for your organization as well. Next is commercial risk. It's so important that we recognize that customers don't buy products in volatile markets. They buy belief. They want to know you understand what's happening and you have a direction forward. And visible leadership shortens that trust gap. So it's not just going to be about the features and the benefits of your product. It's not going to only be what the marketing and the comms teams pulls out and puts out. It's going to be how your core leadership team is actually demonstrating trust and credibility in visible public arenas. Next is investor and partner risk. Capital follows confidence. And confidence is built through repeated exposure to credible leadership signals, not emergency press releases, not one earnings call, consistent direction. Enough on that one. And then lastly, we have operational fragility. If all external credibility sits in one founder alone, your company, it becomes vulnerable. Long are the days that only the founder can be the one that's visible and trying to create credibility and trust externally. When you have a distributed leadership presence, that is actually a hedge against single point failure. NVIDIA does a great job of this. Janssen Wong, probably mispronouncing his name, he has made sure that he's not the only one of his core leadership team that is visible. And he's actually worked to make sure that when they have those visible external moments, that they're actually demonstrating credibility and authority. I call that executive presence 3.0, and I really question who's going to be next, right? But I've done a whole podcast episode on executive presence 3.0 and 4.0, so you can go back and listen to that. But here's the shift. These are the shifts that enterprise leaders need to internalize. Stop treating leadership visibility as output and start treating it as infrastructure. You don't debate whether cybersecurity is optional in unstable markets. You don't treat compliance as nice to have. And visibility belongs in that category: structural protection. So let's operationalize this. If you're sitting in a boardroom right now, here's your framework. Step one, identify your credibility carriers, because titles do not automatically equal credibility. So I want you to ask yourself, who inside your organization naturally commands trust? Map them out. Step two, audit your visibility gaps. Ask yourself, where are industry conversations happening right now? Is it in the media, podcasts, conferences, LinkedIn, investor forums? Is leadership inside of your company, are they present in those rooms? And if not, you've just created a gap that is massive exposure for your organization. That gap is what is going to cost you. Step three, shift from updates to direction. We have to stop communicating only activity and start communicating perspective. Like, what do you see coming? What do you believe about this industry? How are you thinking about the future? And all of your leaders need to be able to answer those questions. And it's not just about the company. You notice I said, how are you thinking? What do you believe? What do you see coming? You have to be able to add in those leadership narratives in addition to the company values and the product features and benefits. Whenever you are able to answer these questions when you're visible, and when your team can answer those questions when you're visible, that builds insulation. Step 4, distribute credibility intentionally. Develop at least 2 to 4 leaders who with defined external lanes, right? Diversify trust. Step 5, treat visibility as cadence, not campaign. Because you can't disappear for 9 months and then post 3 reactive statements during a downturn, because that's going to read as panic. Visibility has to be consistent, it has to be strategic, it has to be tied to business priorities. Again, this is infrastructure. Now, let's go back to North Star, the company that I was telling you about. They didn't overhaul the product, they didn't slash marketing, they actually implemented visible leadership. Monthly industry insights, they did podcast appearances, they had clear messaging about workforce stability, and within 6 months, recruiter activity dropped, customer renewals stabilized, investor conversations shifted. Nothing magical happened operationally, but perception was stabilized. And perception stabilization, it reduces volatility. So let me ask you something. If the market tightened tomorrow, would stakeholders feel steady because of your presence? Or would they go looking for reassurance elsewhere? That answer tells you everything. Because influence is not about being loud, it's about being available when confidence is scarce. So take these 3 questions into your next executive meeting. If our top customers Googled us today, what story would they see? Would top talent view our leadership as visible and credible? Would journalists think of us for expert commentary? If the answer is no, that's not a PR issue, it's risk exposure. In unstable markets, stakeholders are not just evaluating numbers, they are evaluating nerve. Visible leadership signals composure. Composure builds trust. Trust reduces volatility. And that's not marketing, that's economics. So here's your move within the next 30 days. Identify your credibility carriers, define their lanes, establish a visibility cadence, shift messaging toward perspective, distribute trust. Because protection doesn't begin when crisis hits, it begins long before. Visibility, it's not performance, it's insulation. And the leaders who understand that, they don't just survive volatility, they steady it. So, if this episode challenged your thinking, I want you to share it with another executive who's still treating visibility like a marketing tactic, because stability isn't accidental, it's engineered. And if you know that this is something that is happening inside of your organization and you want to shift that, hit me up. I hope you'll go back and listen to previous and future episodes as well. Have a great day, everyone. Bye bye.